Hello everyone, welcome to the channel again. So in the last video we studied about William Wordsworth, and he was the first critic of Romantic age. William Wordsworth told us that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings, emotions recollected in tranquility. He told us that the poet should use the language of ordinary people, the language inspired by rustic life. How there is no essential difference between the language of poetry and the language of prose. Now, in this video, we are going to study about Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who worked in collaboration with William Wordsworth in lyrical ballads as well. He was a fellow romantic as well, though they were belonging to the same age, same romantic period. But still, both of them were agreeing with some points, and Coleridge was disagreeing with some of the points with William Wordsworth. And this is what we are going to study in this video. The work which we are going to discuss in this video is Biographia Literaria, which was published in 1817. Besides that, it is also an important turnover to the literary criticism era as well. Now, before moving forward, we must know that who was Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Samuel Taylor Coleridge was born in 1772 in England. He wrote poems like The Rime of Ancient Mariner, Kubla Khan, Christabel. In his poems, we usually see supernatural elements, psychological depth, haunted beauty, all at the same time. Yet, he was suffering from his opium addiction, because of which he used to left all of the works, mostly of the works which he wrote in the middle. He rarely completed his all works. That's why we don't get much of the works which truly had an essence. But the work which were completed, they really had an influence over people. So there are few of the concepts which are important and which were introduced by Samuel Taylor Coleridge to us. For example, the first thing is primary imagination, secondary imagination, and fancy. Now, these are the concepts that were introduced by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Primary imagination, according to Samuel Taylor Coleridge, is something which can be experienced even by the normal person and the poet at the same time. Now, what is primary imagination? Primary imagination you can understand as the raw experience. Something which you see and then you perceive it. That is primary imagination. For example, if you enter a room, you see things with the colors. Yet you are able to recognize that this is a bed, this is a table, this is a chair, these are the curtains. Why? Because this is the perception which you can do. This is what primary imagination is. This is what everyone and the poet at the same time can perceive. The simple imagination, the normal way of perceiving things. According to Samuel Taylor Coleridge, primary imagination is the repetition in the finite mind of the eternal act of creation. That is primary imagination. Moving forward, we have secondary imagination. Now, it is a level above from primary imagination. If primary imagination can be experienced by everyone and the poet at the same time. Now, secondary imagination is something which can be experienced only by a person who can sit and create something new out of something, who can transform things from one piece to another. That is secondary imagination. It is explained by Samuel Taylor Coleridge as something which dissolves, diffuses, dissipates in order to recreate. For example, if there is a storm, now primary imagination would be that we will see that, okay, we are seeing the clouds. Okay, and this shows the clouds and the dark experience that shows that there is a storm. But what will secondary imagination do in this? They will feel that storm is there. The dark clouds are there, so they are representing grief, they are representing control, they are representing fear. This is something which you are seeing a transformed version, which can't be experienced and described by someone who is normally and casually reading something. This is secondary imagination according to Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Now, the next concept is fancy. Fancy is something which can be explained as something which is mechanical. Like, it is somehow similar to secondary imagination if you will go with the theoretical lines, but it is different from secondary imagination. Secondary imagination is something which transforms from one thing to another. But fancy is something, for example, if you enter a room and you are going to move one thing from one place to another, and it will give you the another way of looking at certain things. For example, if a bed is in your room and you move your bed at the other corner of your room. So then what do you think that is? That is fancy. Now, the experience, the process is not fancy. I am just giving you an example that if you look at certain thing and if you just move things, you do not transform anything. You are not creating anything new. You are just shifting everything here and there. That is fancy. In the simple terms, these are the primary imagination, secondary imagination, and fancy. Among which secondary imagination is something which is creating something new, which is transforming raw data to something which is advanced. These are the explanations of Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Now, moving forward, in the starting of the video, we were discussing about how Coleridge had some disagreement with the words and with the ideas and the points which were made by William Wordsworth. Now, what were they? For example, William Wordsworth was saying that the poet must write the language of ordinary people. They must feel inspired by the rustic life. Only then the ordinary people will feel that this is something which we can relate with. This is something which we can read. The ordinary language must be there. To which Coleridge comes and he says that no, that is not possible. The rustic language, we agree that the rustic life is inspirable. The rustic life is good. The people living in the ordinary village near the nature, they are good, they are inspiring. But we should write in keeping in mind the social status of that people. That is not possible, because poet should be a one level above than the people who are going to read it. Because poet is someone who can express things in more better way than the people who are going to read it. If the poet has the limited knowledge, if the poet is just going to tell you what ordinary people are discussing, then how can you feel inspired? How can you have the different perspective rather than the different ordinary language which you are seeing and witnessing in the everyday life? This was the claim that was made by Coleridge. Now, the second point with which Coleridge felt disagreed with Wordsworth was, Wordsworth said that there is no essential difference between the language of poetry and the language of prose. To which Coleridge comes and he says that there is an essential difference between language of poetry and language of prose. How can you say he is counteracting to the Wordsworth points? Because Wordsworth was saying that only difference between language of prose and language of poetry is that they are using rhythms, they are using meters, they are using musical arrangements. That is only the difference. Otherwise, poetry and prose, the language, both of them are similar. Coleridge comes, he says that how can you say this, that only these things are different? No. When you read any lines of the poems, even single word, even single lines, the metaphors, the imagery, they all make sense individually, and when we read the poem, they make sense at the another part. But when you read the language of prose, that is different. How? Because it is serving one moral purpose. It is serving the one goal from starting till the end. The word is following the sentence is following the rhythm of the whole prose. But it is not similar in the poetry. When you will read a poetry, you will feel that the one line is talking about the ground, the other line is moving forward towards the sky. In the end, I'm talking about the morality. In the end, I'm talking about the death, anything else. So these are how can you say that this is the only difference? There is a lot of difference between the language of poetry and the language of prose. That was the idea of Samuel Taylor Coleridge against William Wordsworth. Moving forward, the next point which was made by Samuel Taylor Coleridge was willing suspension of disbelief. Willing suspension of disbelief, if you remember the Samuel Johnson video, he told us that the audience is not believing anyway that this is the real play that is going on. They know that this is not real, whatever they are watching on the screen, whatever they are seeing getting played. The same idea was propagated by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and he termed this whole thing as the willing suspension of disbelief. Now, what does it say? It says that the audience, the people, the reader, whoever is watching the play, whoever is reading the play, they know that they are not sitting in the real place, the real place where this whole thing is happening. They know that this is not real. Yet they are letting their mind believe that, okay, let us believe that this is real. They know the difference between the real and the real. So it is all upon the poet, it is all upon the reader to not break, to not get strained the belief, the disbelief that they are playing over there. If the reader feels any way in the middle of the movie that I do not believe this is not real, then that is the violation of willing suspension of disbelief. That is what Samuel Taylor Coleridge says. Now, moving forward, he also introduced organic form. Now, what is organic form and what is mechanical form? Mechanical form, you can understand that there is a template of rules, of orders, of anything that just says that these are the things that you need to follow if you want something to have as great. If you want to have the great writing, then these are the architects, these are the rules, these are the orders that you must follow. That is the mechanical form. Just understand it like this way. Organic form, on the other side, is something which says that, like for example, you read about Shakespeare. Shakespeare broke all the rules, yet he achieved nature more than the people who even followed the rules. Now, what does this mean? That organic rules, organic unity, that means that something which the emotions, the feelings that comes from within. And at that point, we agree with Shakespeare, because whatever play you read, which was written by Shakespeare, he shows us that this is the peak of the emotions which we are feeling. That is organic. Now, moving forward, Coleridge also gives the definition of poem and a poet. What is a poet, according to Samuel Taylor Coleridge? So he says that the poet is someone who thinks deeply and thinks clearly, who feels deeply and thinks clearly. That is the real definition of poet. Not someone who just either thinks clearly or feels deeply. You can't say that he is the real poet. He is not. He must have the essence of thinking, feeling things deeply. He should have more sympathizer than the person who is feeling the pain. He should feel more than the ordinary person in order to make them feel what he is experiencing at that point of time. That is the definition of a great poet, according to Samuel Taylor Coleridge. For example, you can understand that the sky was darkened and it was about to rain. These lines can be very easily seen in the prose version. But in the poem version, you will see that the sky was deepened into darkness and heavy with unspoken pain. This is the poetry version. Something which makes you feel that this is something which is out of understanding. Something which is out of peak. That makes you sit and think and ponder over your thought. That is poetry version. So these are few of the concepts which Samuel Taylor Coleridge talks about in Biography Literaria, and something which he disagrees with Wordsworth. And the imagination, fancy, willing suspension of disbelief. These are the concepts which were completely new, and somehow these things are going to shape modern criticism, psychoanalytical criticism in the future videos. So that's it for today. See you soon in the next video with the concept of John Keats. See you there.